Hello, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today I have my October wrap up. So in the month of October, I read a total of 5 books and I also DNF'd 2 books, which I will talk about my reasons why. So while 5 books may not be as many as some of my previous wrap-ups, you will see from the stats that I actually read quite a large amount of pages, and that is because 3 of the books that I read were quite large. 2 of them were over 600 pages and 1 of them was 500 pages. So I may not have completed a lot of books, but I did read a whole bunch and this month was a success overall. I did take part in a total of 3 readathons in October, and they were Spookathon, Witchathon, and the Charms Magical Readathon Extra Credit Readathon. And I will talk about those briefly when I mention the books. So first up, let's run through the stats. So in October, I read a total of 2,896 pages, which works out as an average of 93 pages per day. For my star ratings, I had a good month overall. I had 1 3-star, 3 4-star, and 1 5-star book, although one of the 4 stars was more like a 3.5, and that is an average of a 4-star rating overall. For the demographics, I read 4 young adult books and 1 adult book. For the formats, we had 4 standard and 1 audiobook, and for the genres, we didn't have a huge range this month. I read 3 fantasy and 2 thrillers. So I'm going to start off with the books that I DNF'd this month, and the first one is American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. This is an adult thriller that follows our main character Patrick, who is quite a big deal on Wall Street. He's a really rich guy, he has a lot of status, but he is also a murderer. I started reading this as part of a buddy read with Mel from Mel Moriarty, however her schedule got a little bit hectic so she had to put it on pause. I did try and continue this without her, but if you have been watching my vlogs, you know that my mental health has not been the best recently, and so for me to read and enjoy reading, I have to sort of only pursue books that I really love and are going to make me happy. I got up to page 188 of this and I don't think it's a bad book. I think it's a very good book. I think it's very well written and I think it's very satirical. However, the subject matter is very dark, it's very graphic. The writing style is very stylistic. It is a particular choice that has been made by the author to portray the mental state of the main character. So it is a very well written book and I do believe it is a good book. However, you are not supposed to like the main character and you are not supposed to like the story, and that is just something that I couldn't handle right now, and so sadly I had to put it on hold. Normally I would push through because obviously I understand that I'm not supposed to like this book, but just the place that I'm in right now, having so many books am I currently reading was like stressing me out quite a bit, and the subject matter made it something that I just didn't really want to pursue. The second book that I DNF'd was Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. I was rereading this for the Big Buddy read along. However, just before that read along started, I received an arc of Muse of Nightmares, and so I read Muse of Nightmares and then I went back to reread Strange the Dreamer. Originally my plan was to reread Strange the Dreamer while hosting the Big Buddy read along, and then I would be fresh from Muse of Nightmares. However, because I received an arc, I did read Muse of Nightmares first. I didn't manage to finish this before the end of the Big Buddy read along, but now carrying on with this kind of seems redundant because I'm not going to reread Muse of Nightmares straight away, and so there's not really any point me pushing to continue this. I do absolutely love this book, but once again the stress of having so many things on my currently reading shelf was just a little bit too much for me, so I decided not to continue my reread. I did make it to around page 250 in this. You all know I absolutely love this book and I didn't not finish it because I don't enjoy it. Like, you know that I don't feel like I have to explain it. Before I move on to the books that I actually finished, I just wanted to explain a little bit about me saying that the stress of my currently reading was getting a little bit too much for me. As you probably know, in September I did only read 3 books. I was slumping hard, and because of that I kept picking up books and reading 50 pages and then putting them down, and then I'd pursue them a little bit and then I'd put them down and read something else. So I was like 40 to 50% through 5 books at one point, and I have other books that I really want to read. Like, I still haven't read Kingdom of Ash, which is out now, and I just felt like the pressure of having all these things I was halfway through and needed to complete was really making me not want to read and therefore not motivating me to read. So I decided to do a clear out. I finished what I could, a couple of which are on here. maybe 3 of them. The others I just DNF'd. I just need a fresh slate and to kind of start again. So the first book that I actually completed in October was Empire of Storms by Sarah J Maas. This was the only book I completed in the Charms Extra Credit Readathon, and I used it for the challenge Incendio, which was a book with fire. This is a young adult fantasy, as you all know, and it is the 5th book in the core Throne of Glass series. I can't really explain the plot of this to you with it being the 5th book in a series, but this I did thoroughly enjoy. This is my favourite book in the Throne of Glass series so far. As a lot of you may know, this is a reread for me. I did do a book diary. This is the last book in the Throne of Glass series that was a reread. I'm currently reading Terror of Dawn for the first time and I'm loving it. I'm just past halfway. But this one is my favourite because the stakes are really high. You have a lot more characters. Everybody who's been sort of roaming around has met up because this book has quite a large cast and they come together and drift apart throughout the course of the story, but this is where like 80% of the key players all end up in the same place and it's really high stakes. The end of this book is the most important and most shocking thing that has happened in the Throne of Glass series so far. The cliffhanger is just like so much that I'm just desperate to read Kingdom of Ash, and that really delayed me starting Terror of Dawn because I just wanted Kingdom of Ash. However, I know that I have to read Terror of Dawn and I've like since moved through that and I'm progressing with that so that I can get to Kingdom of Ash because I really need it. If you guys have read this and you want to check out my book diary, then please go ahead. It's a super high energy one. Like the first clip, I'm just really not feeling it, and then it's just fangirling throughout. So if you're interested in that, it will be linked above. The second book that I completed is an adult thriller, and it is the only book I completed for Spookathon, and that is Night Film by Marisha Pessel. This one completed the Spookathon challenges to read a book with a spooky word in the title, which was night, to read a thriller, and there was one more. Oh, to read a book with pictures because it's has mixed media elements. So this one I gave 4 stars, and it follows a journalist. The journalist had a really good career. He was doing really well for himself. He was married, he had a kid, and then he had an anonymous phone call from this guy called John who gave him some information about this notorious and elusive film director Francis Cordova. The information was quite disturbing, and so on national television the journalist felt compelled to announce this news to the entire country, I guess. Because of that, he became disgraced, his wife divorced him, and he's not in a very good place anymore. However, he receives news that the director's daughter has apparently committed suicide, and this compels him to dive back into the mystery of this director. I did really enjoy this. I was compelled throughout most of it. I really love the mixed media aspects, which are website pages and files. A large section of the mixed media is from this dark web website where Cordova fans who call themselves Cordovites all gather to share theories and the dark cult horror themes of the director's films. What I will say is that if you have read The Hazelwood, this book follows pretty much the exact same plot. It has a whole crazy section where you don't have a clue what's going on, and generally the whole themes are just the same, apart from this is a more adult nature and it follows a director instead of an author. The reason that I didn't give this a full 5 stars is because it came to a point close to the end of the book where I thought that the ending was perfect. It was this big twist that I didn't see coming and I thought it was amazing. And then the book carried on for another 60 pages and then ended on a speculative note, which is something that I just really don't like. It's one of the reasons I don't like magical realism, because I like everything to be wrapped up and fully explained. Myself as a person, I like to understand things and how they work. So in books, it just really doesn't translate well with me. But aside from that, I did really enjoy it. The next book that I completed was for Witchathon, and it was to complete the challenge to read a book with paranormal elements and also to read a book that features your ethnic heritage. And this book has since been returned to the library, but it was Sea Witch by Sarah Henning. This is a young adult fantasy, and it is a origin story of the Sea Witch in Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Mermaid. I gave this one 3 stars, but if I was being like real picky, it would be more of a 2.5. I really did not get into this book very well. So essentially this follows 2 girls and 1 boy. The boy is a prince. One of the girls drowned and the other girl is a witch. However, magic is outlawed in this kingdom. It's set in Denmark in the past, and she sort of keeps this a secret. She's best friends with the prince, and their mutual friend Anna died. However, one day Nick falls into the ocean. Nick is the prince, and he is rescued by a mermaid who then comes to land, and this mermaid bears an awfully big resemblance to their dead friend. Now, I was expecting something a little bit dark and delicious with it being a villain origin story. However, for the first 200 pages of this book. It's very light, it's very not fluffy, but it's all like happy and skipping around, and I didn't really feel the dark undercurrents that I expected from a villain origin story. It was just all very light and surface level. It did a lot of telling and not showing, and it was set to be a 2 stars for me. However, when I got to the last 110 pages or so, there was a twist, and I got some of that dark, delicious, like twisted nature that I was really looking for in this book. And so in the end, I did end up giving it 3 stars. Now, I know a lot of people do love this book, so maybe it just missed the mark with me a little bit. I just wish that it had a little bit more of the darker elements and wasn't quite so simple and all nicey at the beginning. The next book I read was also for Witchathon, and that was to complete the challenge to read a horror or a thriller book, and I listened to this in audiobook in pretty much one sitting. I listened to it on my 7.5-hour drive to Liverpool and back to meet Lady Taylor, and that is Sadie by Courtney Summers. This is a story in 2 perspectives. The first perspective is from a guy who runs a crime podcast, and he has been asked by the surrogate grandmother of Sadie to look into the disappearance of Sadie and also the death of Sadie's younger sister, and she has left to hunt down the killer of her younger sister. I did really enjoy this one. I gave this one 4 stars. The bit that follows the guy running the podcast actually follows a podcast style. The audiobook has a full cast narration, and I just found those bits really compelling, and it made me really want to listen to true crime podcasts, even though I wouldn't know where to start because I've never listened to a podcast in my life. But those bits I found absolutely amazing and really loved. The bits that followed Sadie I did also enjoy. They weren't as exciting and interesting, but there was a little bit of information added that you didn't get from the podcast. What I also thought was really good is that you would see something in Sadie's perspective, and then a little bit later on you would see it told in the podcast as the guy goes to interview the people who have encountered Sadie while she's been missing. And it was interesting to see multiple sides to the same sort of situations and stories. The reason that I gave this 4 stars and not 5 is one of the reasons that I didn't like Night Film, and that the ending is not good. It's a speculative ending, and especially in a thriller, I just want it tied up. Like, if you're following a mystery the entire way through the book, you want an answer to that mystery. Otherwise, what is the point in reading it? So it was really enjoyable, and it definitely made my drive, which was hellish, really bearable. But the ending just wasn't really what I wanted, and for that I did deduct a star. The last book that I finished was Furyborn by Claire Legrand. I started buddy reading this with Rachel from Rachel Marie Book Junkie, but she really wasn't enjoying it, so she just sped read to the end, and because of that it took me a long time to finish this book, because then I was like trying to motivate myself. This one completed the Witchathon challenge to read a book by candlelight. I had a nice relaxing time finishing the last 200 pages of this book with all my candles around me. And this one is a young adult fantasy, although I'm not sure where it's sold in the UK. I don't think I've seen it in a bookstore, but I have a feeling in the UK it's sold as adult. And it follows 2 queens, Riel and Eliana. Riel is in the past, and the story starts out where she's given birth to this child, which she then sends away. It then skips 2 years previous to that and begins to tell her story and how she ended up in the position that she was in. And Eliana is in the present day of the world, although it's still like a historical fantasy type setting, and she is called the Dread, and she's essentially like a Mia Corvia assassin type character who kills people for the Empire. Now, the tagline on this book is "The world will fall, 2 queens will rise," and these are known as the Blood Queen and the Sun Queen. The Blood Queen is prophesied to destroy the world, and the Sun Queen is prophesied to save it. So obviously going into it, you know that these girls are going to be one of the queens each, and that premise really hooked me. I haven't reviewed this on Goodreads yet because I want to look at the footage that I took for the book diary I filmed for this book and kind of see what my rating is actually going to be, because I could easily rate this both a 2 stars and a 4 stars. Now, generally I rate on enjoyment, so that would make it a 4 stars. However, critically it would probably be a 2 stars. So for the purpose of my wrap up, I've put it at like a 3.5. I did really enjoy this, and when I got past page like 100 I found it really compelling. However, the first 100 and something pages were really confusing. You're thrown into this world and you don't have any sort of idea what's going on. Angels were mentioned in the first chapter, which completely threw me because I did not sign up for angels. I signed up for high fantasy and not paranormal, so I was a little bit thrown by that. However, as the course of the book went on, I was compelled to continue and ended up kind of enjoying it. I preferred Eliana much more than Riel. Part of those reasons is that I found that Eliana's chapters were a lot better written. Through Riel's storyline, she has to complete a series of trials in various elements, and I found the action scenes in this book, especially the trials, to be very badly written. I didn't have a clue what was going on. The trials, it were very sort of squashed. She would emerge into these trials and she would just begin. There was no setup of what the trial actually was. I think at least 3 of them took part in a maze, which was like a little bit lacking originality. And I just had so many problems with the writing of this book and a few other things that will be mentioned in my book diary that I can't quite remember because it was such a long drawn out process reading this book. But there's definitely a lot of flaws in it, especially with the writing. And I thought that Claire Legrand was a debut author with this book. However, after looking her up on Goodreads, she has written quite a few books. I am going to try the Swordkill Girls by her and see if it's kind of the same, and I do want to continue on with this series, and I'm hoping it does improve and her writing in the action scenes gets a little bit better, because they were just so hard to follow. If you have read this book, please let me know if you also found that, because I'm not sure if it's kind of like my mental state when reading it and I wasn't focusing properly. But the trials were definitely underdeveloped and it really impacted my enjoyment of the book as a whole. I do like the storyline, but the only other criticism that I really have of it is that when I got to the end and I thought about the plot of the book as a whole, it felt like nothing really happened. I expected the book to end where the prologue ends, so where she's giving up the baby, but it doesn't. It ends like way before that. So I'm guessing the entirety of the series will be coming up to this point of the prologue, in which case I wondered why the prologue was in this book, because normally if you have a prologue in that style, when you get much later in the book, you see where the prologue comes into play, with example, Strange the Dreamer. But for some reason, I enjoyed it. So 3.5 stars, but just know that I didn't find it particularly well written, but I did kind of enjoy it. So that is everything that I read in the month of October. Please let me know what you read. Please let me know your thoughts on any of these books, especially Furyborn. I'm all over the place with that book. I don't know what to think. Also, let me know if you liked the endings of Sadie and Night Film, because I know some people don't mind speculative endings, but they're just really not for me. But that is everything for this video. Please don't forget to like if you like it and subscribe if you want to. If you head into my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish body butter and candle website, the Instagram for that, and a 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today. Bye!
You say you'll go and nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.